Good morning. Thanks, Danielle. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. And I really just want to pick up from where Danielle left off, that we have many new attendees here. So if this is your first time attending the conference, just raise your hand. So, I'll try to come and say hi to you later on. And all of us, we're going to try to do that. So welcome. We really want to make sure you feel welcome in our conference and meet family doctors and everybody and the breadth of it. And I'm going to point your attention to the logo, Hearts and Minds. And so that's what we work with. We work with hearts and minds, and we help change hearts and minds every day. And whether it's with that one patient who you're seeing in your clinic, or you're working more in the community, or you're working more at a population, that's what we're in the business of. So as we're looking to what we take into the future, it's hearts and minds. So with that, it actually gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today for the Walter Rosser lecture. And for those of you who knew Dr. Walter Rosser, he was a great man. He was the chair of the department when I was a resident and when I got into my faculty position. And he was one of the most supportive, humble individuals who could help a junior faculty. And in many ways, I am here today because of his mentorship and sponsorship and help for somebody who walked around and still walks around with an imposter syndrome as to who am I to be here? So he was an amazing man who helped you through all of that. And unfortunately, he passed away after a brief illness in 2022. But we have got this lecture in his honor, and Jack is going to talk a lot more about him. But he's been the chair of DFCM at McMaster, Ottawa, and Queens, and he was just making his way across the country. And this lecture namesake honors his contributions to the advancement of family medicine and the evolution of primary care research. For all our funded researchers here, it was his vision, his moving that forward, that was able to get that established, that we have 30 family docs funded to do primary care research, So making us one of the largest places in the world. So he is somebody who always thought about tomorrow, but never forgot about today. And I think that's our challenge. And with that, I do want to make sure we introduce our speaker for today, who Danielle has talked about, Jack. And listening to Jack, I can, it's a spoiler alert, but be prepared for both your mind and your heart to be stimulated in ways that you never thought were possible. So, Jack grew up in Yuma, Colorado, so automatically he gets it. In high school, he worked in a hospital, then got his EMT degree, and completed his MD and Master's in Public Health at the University of Kansas School of Medicine. Internship in hospital medicine at Wichita, Kansas, and his family medicine residency at the University of Colorado Rose Family Medicine Program. He then obviously joined the faculty there, and he started the High Plains Research Network, a geographic community and practice-based research network in rural and frontier Colorado. He practiced family medicine in several rural communities, including Lemon, Fort Morgan, and his hometown of Yuma. He was ahead of his time. He initiated medication-assisted treatment in his family practice in 2016, which is really in response to what was happening in the communities. He's worked at HPRN and its participatory community advisory council, has included funding from several sources like the CDC, NIH, and AHRQ, and numerous state and local foundations. He retired, but it was not really, but he retired from the University of Colorado School of Medicine, and then after that worked for several years as director of whole person care at the Santa Clara County Health and Hospitals in San Jose, California. Then, he retired again, and then he served for several years as the director of the Robert Graham Center for Policy Research and Primary Care in DC, and then, like a salmon, he's returned to Colorado. And he continues to consult and collaborate on primary care practice-based research, community-based participatory research, integrated primary care and behavioral health, and the interface between primary care, public, and community health. He enjoys practicing ambulatory family medicine part-time in his hometown of Yuma, Colorado. So, Jack.
Thank you for having me here today. Wow. I'm going to talk a little bit about Walt Rosser. One of the things you might not know about him is he's Presbyterian, and it would appear you're all Presbyterians because you just don't sit in the front row of. So those of you coming in and piled in the corner back there, there's 50 people at that table. We have a row of empty tables for you to come and heckle. Michelle, where are you? Because I expect some heckling from Dr. Griever. Where is she? She'll, I'm hoping, say something. So Dr. Rosser, I got to know Dr. Rosser through NAPCRAG, the North American Primary Care Research Group. He always acted interested in my work. Even when it was ill-formed, all over the place, he asked great questions, was never condescending, and often had something funny to say. His collaboration stretched all over the world, to the Caribbean, Europe, Oceania, Canada, and he was the president of NAPCRAG. I got to know him then. He spent decades. Here's some photos of him and some other folks. He wrote a book about family medicine and like 14 editions of it. And his contribution to family medicine was extensive. I can do that. Awesome. Now, it's always funny when people have this because they point it at the screen, right? They do this instead of the computer. So here's one from 2011 about progress on Ontario's family health teams. 2004, so, back a little bit, that's 20 years ago. 1981, the NAPCRAG process classification for primary care. This was an attempt to classify primary care taxonomy. 1981, 20, 30, 40 years. But 1970, farmer's lung, a diagnostic dilemma challenge for family physicians. So over 70, 80, 90, 40, over 4 decades, Dr. Rosser was making a contribution. It is an honor, actually. Thank you for letting me do the Walt Rosser. He is, he's one of my heroes. He spent 4 decades trying to study family medicine, what matters most, and spent a lot of time helping us understand what matters most. Walt was persistent. He was very active in the Ambulatory Sentinel Practice Network, ASPEN, which was one of the first PBRNs, practice-based research networks, in Canada and the US, and it was a binational ambulatory practice-based research network. And he and some of his colleagues came up with a great idea to study chest pain in primary care, and they presented it at an annual ASPEN convocation, and the practices said, no, we don't want it. And it was known as the Peaceful Valley Massacre. It was in Peaceful Valley, Colorado, a little resort in the mountains outside of Denver. But Walt was like, they don't know what the hell they're doing. They can't say no to me. I'm going to just keep trying to do this. So they totally reworked it. They listened to the family docs who told them what mattered most. They redid it, and they were able to actually then finally, over a period of about 8 years, do this project and publish it. And one other little fact, he and Janet were avid curlers. So I don't know what that means, but I found it somewhere, and they said they were avid curlers, and I think it's something you all north of the border know what that means. I don't know what curling is. Well, Last Chance, so east of Last Chance, Last Chance is an actual place in my home state, and near where I grew up. I've been through it many times. Here's a postcard of it. I used to try to do research in the local area where I was giving a talk, so in this case it would have been Toronto, to use local images and places and people to tell a story. But it always seemed a little shallow and cursory and not really genuine. I didn't know the people, I didn't know the places. I'd Google it, I'd do a Google drive-through, get some images. And I really didn't have much right to be talking about your place. So now I I don't. I talk about my place and my experience, the place I know, the people I know. And I hope you'll get to know it a little better. And I really hope that what you'll start to see is some similarities between my place and your place. So we've done the land acknowledgement, and so this is a repeat of that. But again, I'm probably not qualified to give a land acknowledgement for Toronto. So I grew up in eastern Colorado, and I want to acknowledge and honor the legacy of eastern Colorado Indigenous people who cared for the land for generations, are mostly displaced, but continue to work and care for land far removed from their place of origin: the Pawnee, the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Apache, and the Osage. I recognize that colonialism and oppression of Native peoples is ongoing, and I commit to building our awareness, our shared efforts to try and give respect to the elders and the land that we all live on. Eastern Colorado has a particular history. It's the home of the Sand Creek Massacre in the late half of the 19th century, where a peaceful village of about 150 indigenous Cheyenne were massacred by an army regiment. In a moment of silence, I just want to remember all those and recommit to thinking how we can deal peacefully and respectfully with our indigenous colleagues. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So I have some disclosures. You know, if you get continuing education, you always have to give disclosures, and you have to make sure that people understand where you're coming from. So my disclosures are: I grew up east of Last Chance. I practiced family medicine east of Last Chance. I researched east of Last Chance, and I am invested. Maybe not financially, but emotionally and cognitively invested in the people and the land east of Last Chance. For Steinbeck fans, you may recognize a few quotes from East of Eden. And East of Eden is sort of the concept of being kicked out of paradise. For those of you, Steinbeck's book, East of Eden, talks about sort of what is it being kicked out of paradise, and how do you live? So here we are, current day Last Chance. That postcard's a few years old. Here's a current picture. In human affairs of danger and delicacy, successful conclusion is sharply limited by hurry. So often we trip by being in a rush. So let's just slow the roll. My kids say that. Look at east of Last Chance. Let's head up from east of Last Chance. This is Last Chance from about 1,500 feet. Here we are at 25,000 feet. There's there's Last Chance, and you start seeing some square land, and you're going to see some round. So there's square fields and round fields. Square fields are dry land. That means they just get the water from the sky. And as we go up higher, you're going to see round fields up there in the upper right-hand corner. The round fields are center pivot sprinklers. So they rotate in a big circle and create a round field. That's from 10 miles. You can see Denver there on the left, and the county markers there on the right. Here we are from 35 miles. I grew up right there. East of Last Chance is that circle. We're about 35 miles high. And here it is in context to Toronto. There's Toronto in the upper right, and there's east of Last Chance. And it's really what people call is flyover country. You're probably never going to land in anywhere east of Last Chance. You're going to fly over it, and you're going to see all those crop circles. They're not made by aliens. They're just crop circles. They're cornfields and square wheat fields. So wheat is square, corn is round. Okay, so it's a Friday This is Highway 34. It's a blue highway. Let's run through east of Last. Let's go a little bit east of Last Chance and look at some of the land. This is the Eckley Garage. Eckley is a town of about 180 people. My best friend growing up, his family had bought this old schoolhouse. So they had the schoolhouse that had 8 classrooms in it, and it was in a circle, so you could actually roller skate in their house. The upper left is called the Honeymoon Shack. It was built in 1900. It's one room, still there, and it's right outside of Otis, Colorado. I lived in Otis when I was first born. It's a windmill, and it was the Honeymoon Shack because it was sort of inhabited by about 20 or 25 different families, couples, in their first few years, and then they would homestead land and move on to another place. Oh, so I found some farmland, a great farm picture in the middle of Toronto. This is the Riverdale farm, and there I said I don't do a Google drive-by, but I lied. You're going to see mostly eastern Colorado, but every once in a while I wanted to put in a little Toronto to wake you up and be like, oh, I recognize that. My place does look like his place. So you may have seen pictures of the Dust Bowl. Anybody ever hear of the Dust Bowl in rural America? It was a big deal. It was in the 20s and 30s. Land dried out and the wind blew. This is a picture from the 30s. This is called a dust blow up. And a guy, Timothy Egan, wrote a book called The Worst Hard Time. And in his book about eastern Colorado, he describes a new type of mental illness, the person driven mad by dust. Another day of wind and dust and hopes deferred. Timothy Egan in The Worst Hard Time. And actually, it's interesting, Weather Zone did a little Twitter poll, and they found that higher wind speeds were associated with increased levels of depression. And actually, there's some publications, a 2008 German publication that shows higher levels of depression and anxiety when it's windy. So eastern Colorado has both the wind and some of that dirt and despair. Well, just so you know that it wasn't just in the 1920s, here's a blow up. I was actually in this. I was in this blow up. I've been in these. This isn't an old 100-year-old. This still happens. The weather gets right, the fields are dry, the wind comes up, and it comes up all at once. And so we still have dust blow-ups in eastern Colorado. I always pause on this one because it takes a minute for people to sort out sort of what they're looking at. Do you have tumbleweeds in Ontario? You may not have tumbleweeds. Anybody here from Saskatchewan? There you are, David. I see you. You have tumbleweeds in Saskatchewan. So tumbleweeds are dried out weeds. And in the fall, they dry up, they detach from the ground, and they blow. And this is the High Plains Research Network's research assistant who lives in Sterling, Colorado. This is her house after a windstorm. The fire department came out and said, you know, Kristen, you're going to have to remove those. Well, yeah, okay. The really cool thing is you just rake them to the street and burn them. So in eastern Colorado, you can just pile them up, light them on fire, and there's nothing else to burn. There's gravel there in the driveway. So Timothy Egan, our community members of our Community Advisory Council, read the book, Worst Hard Time. And they read this part. This part of America, the rural counties of the Great Plains look like it's dying. Our rural past seems so distant, like Dorothy's Kansas in The Wizard of Oz. Yet, It was within the lifetime of people living today that nearly 1 in 3 Americans worked on a farm. Now, the site of the old Dust Bowl is largely devoid of young families and emptying out by the day. It's flyover country to most Americans. Now, God bless Timothy Egan. He came in and he talked to a few people. He saw what he wanted to see. He heard what he wanted to hear. He had already outlined the book. He'd seen the pictures of the Dust Bowl. He'd outlined his book. So he just needed a few anecdotes. He didn't spend much time east of Last Chance. He did not break bread. He didn't go to a football game. There is no hockey in eastern Colorado. He didn't sit at the kitchen table having peach pie and iced tea. He really was the worst hard time. And he made a substantial sampling error. He didn't spend any time getting to know people. And so he wrote a book about that place called The Worst Hard Time. And the young families that I work with were largely offended that he dismissed the location so quickly. So what is east of Last Chance? Where is paradise? Is it paradise lost? Have we found? Have we discovered paradise? Have we created paradise, or is it a choice? So Timothy Egan was a helicopter researcher. He flew in, spent a few days, chatted with a couple of people, formed an opinion. He took a snapshot rather than a movie. And he found what he expected: dirt and dry and despair. He made a sampling error. We're all susceptible to this. Whether it's in research or clinic, we are susceptible to that sampling error. So let's take another look. Let's step back, a longer view, a little more data. Let's look at the businesses, visit some of the people, and meet the High Plains Research Network. During the dry years, the people forgot about the rich years, and when the wet years returned, they lost all memory of the dry years. It was always that way. I'd narrate these for you, but I only have an hour, and you don't need narration for these. I will talk a little bit about this. This is Walsh, Colorado. It's a town of 400 people, and they lost their grocery store. And it's about 50 miles to the next closest place to buy groceries. And so they didn't know what to do, and they decided that they would actually just develop a grocery cooperative. And so all the community members volunteer, they stock shelves, they ring up people, they box the groceries. And so that town now has a grocery store staffed by a cooperative group of volunteers from the community. So they painted this on the side of the grocery store. Pulling together, we all win. And Last Chance still has a quilting bee. So, you know, there were only the 3 houses. Here are the 3 people who live there. But there's actually a broader catchment area. And by golly, young family. There are young families east of Last Chance. I just had to put this one in. I stopped by there last year when I was here and took a picture because I love this show. So. Well, we've got big data. Anybody here big data researcher? data researchers? Anybody know what big data is? It's thousands and thousands. There you go. There's some hands going up. Well, we've got big data about the people of eastern Colorado. So High Plains Research Network, 16 counties east of Last Chance, about 30,000 square miles. That's 1 million square kilometers. That was, wow. Okay, we're going to try that again. Hey, people standing in the back, we have tables if you want to. So we're going to take a 30-second break while they come up because I don't want them to miss anything. In fact, while they're doing that, everybody stand up because, you know, sitting is the new smoking. So we'll stand up and sort of shake it out a little bit while we get to the big data because this is really not the exciting part of the talk. And then the people walking up are unnoticeable as they wander. Wait, there's like half a dozen people leaving. That was not, okay, everybody sit down. There's 16 small hospitals. I worked at a hospital. These are hospitals, this is a 10-bed hospital. So the critical access hospitals they're called critical access. They're 10 beds. They have an ER. Average daily census is 5 to 8 patients. We have 54 practices, about 170 physician, nurse practitioner, and PAs. The HPRN's mission is to help rural primary care providers and practices continue to provide excellent rural health care by translating the best scientific evidence into everyday clinical practice. That's the mission statement founding in 1997. So here's some big data, and I'm just going to show you these tables. This is hospitalizations for mental health conditions. We know it by county, by zip code. We know it by age group. We can describe the people. This is hospitalizations for ambulatory care-sensitive conditions with upper and lower limits by the regions and the counties. We got a map. We can map that stuff. Red is worse. And you can see the eastern Colorado is darker red, so that means it's bad. You guys have maps of your place. This is enrolled patients as a percent of total population for Toronto neighborhoods. We have the county population by the regions, by the counties, Sedgwick, Morgan, Yuma. High Plains Research Network and east of Last Chance is Region 1, 5, 6, and a little bit of Region 14. We know what the social determinants of health are. We know income and poverty, education and crime. We know their health behaviors, how much fast food they eat, what kind of fruits and vegetables. We know the workforce, mental health providers and psychologists and physicians. We have a lot of data about the people. Here's a little bit about life expectancy in Toronto, males and females. Females, you're rocking it there on the right. Men, you've got a little ways to go. But really, from afar, big data just is, little meaningless. These fields, you don't really know what's going on when you fly over. And big data is sort of like flying over the area. Lee's hand shook. This is from East of Eden. As he filled the delicate cups, he drank his down in one gulp. Don't you see, he cried, the American Standard Translation of the Bible orders men to triumph over sin, and you can call this sin ignorance. The King James translation makes a promise in thou shalt, meaning that men and women will surely triumph over sin. But the Hebrew word, the word timshel, thou mayest, that gives a choice. It might be the most important word in the world. That says the way is open. It throws it back on to people. For if thou mayest, it is also true that thou mayest not. So, let's just look a little bit at the people who have made a choice to live east of Last Chance. Here we are starting off breakfast with the High Plains Research Network Community Advisory Council, farmers, ranchers, school teachers, retired people. It can be a tough crowd. It can be a fun crowd. And I believe this, that the free, exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for, the freedom of mind to take any direction it wishes, undirected. Who here has worked on a mission statement? Who here has worked on a strategic plan? So, mission statements can take a while. I've worked on them a month, 6 months. The University of Colorado took a year to do their mission statement, and it really should have taken about 30 seconds because the one they came up with was... Anyway, so our Community Advisory Council, we were going to do a mission statement. 18 minutes. 18 minutes. The guiding principle of the CAC is to help inform and guide research in real patient experience and assure information garnered returns to and improves the quality of health care in individual rural communities. 18 minutes from start to finish. They sort of started talking about it. They wrote this down, and they were like, that's it. Let's go to work. It wasn't that this was a perfect mission statement. We could wordsmith this. Garnered, what the heck's that mean? But it was good enough to move to the work. Let's do some work. Let's get going. So here's one of our, this is a hot take from the High Plains Research Network. Stop building trust. Now, oftentimes that's the first thing that everybody says, build trust. And our group says, stop building trust, just be trustworthy. You can't build trust. All you can do is be trustworthy. You have to do that, be trustworthy. These slides are automatically moving forward. That's weird. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Gary Haynes. He's the guy there with his arms crossed. So we were starting out, and we were a year in, and our Community Advisory Council was learning about how to be a Community Advisory Council, how do you work together. And we'd been doing some reading, and we had some visitors, and they said, you know, you need articles of incorporation, and you need a charter, and you need some formal documents, and you need some legal documents. 10 minutes. Oh, okay, 30 minutes. Awesome, okay, thank you. Somebody just held up a sign that in the back, I need to get moving. No, I'm good. And so we were doing this, and eyes were starting to glaze over, sort of like I'm seeing here when I talk about articles of incorporation and charters. And finally, Gary Haynes, the guy there, he stood up, and he crossed his arms, and he said, okay, Westfall, here's the deal. As long as the work we do is helping my community, I'll show up. The first time this becomes about you or the university or some paper you want to publish, I'm out of here. And he sat down, and everybody else stood up, and they all clapped, and they said, okay, that's our scope of work. That's our ethic. That's what we're going to do. And we put all the papers away. We tossed them. And they're important for some groups. This group really wanted to do this across the table, a handshake, a look in the eye. We're going to do this. We're going to be trustworthy, and we're going to live by the Gary Haynes ethic. And we talk about this every time we meet. We talk about how do we do this? How do we make sure Gary Haynes ethic is done? So we learn a lot. So they're learning spirometry at asthma boot camp. There are no ugly questions except those clothed in condescension. Here they are preparing to give a talk at a conference. And so this is Mike Hernandez. His shirt says, I may not have a PhD. Any PhDs here? I know there's some. Any MDs here? Yeah. I may not have a PhD, but I do have a DD-214. Anybody know what a DD-214 is? You may not have them in Canada. But a DD-214 is an honorable discharge from the service. So he was a veteran. He had served our country. And while he did not have a PhD, working with the High Plains Research Network, he came to understand that the expertise and the experience he had brought the same level of commitment and expertise to our group that our PhD had, and that we really tried to honor the DD-214 equally with the PhD. It's imperative to marry intellectual rigor and perseverance with interpersonal kindness. This is Morris Wood. Morris Wood founded NAPCRAG. He was a great man. He's passed. He came to NAPCRAG until he was 95, I think, and danced until he was 92. And he was perseverant and kind. And so the High Plains Research Network Community Advisory Council, they are kind. So when they got invited to present at NAPCRAG, they said, well, if we're going to go to Puerto Rico, we want to do something to help. So they organized a backpack collection and got NAPCRAG members, 200 of them, to bring a backpack full of school supplies to Puerto Rico, and then they donated it to a local school in Puerto Rico. These two, Chris and Caitlin, started with the High Plains Research Network Advisory when they were in high school, and they continued throughout their college career to participate. We'll talk a little bit about a project they did for us. And then they invited the entire group to their wedding. This is a group of baseball players from Northeastern Community College talking about asthma, an asthma project that we worked with. And here's the asthma project in the clinic. And here's Gary Haynes again teaching about colon cancer at the Haxton Gun Club. So the Haxton Gun Club is out in the middle of nowhere. It's a town of 700 people. They have 40 people show up to the gun club meeting, and he got quite a bit of grief. No, heckling, something. It was all in good fun about testing to prevent colon cancer. And it's a well-balanced family with its conservatives and its radicals, its dreamers, and its realists. So there you see, okay, I'm going to just tell this story. The kid in the blonde, Chris, with the blonde hair. So he calls me. We're going to Montreal to present in a pre-conference at the Ganawagi Mohawk Nation Longhouse. And the Lyman football team has just made it to the state championship. They're the best, one of the two best teams in the state. And he calls me and he says, you know, when we get to the championship, when we make it, the football team all decides to do something with our hair as a symbol of collective work. And so we're going to shave mohawks into our heads. And I just wondered what you thought of that. He's 17, you know. So I said, well, so Chris, let's just talk about some facts that you may not know. We're going to Montreal. We're going to Ganawagi, to the Mohawk Nation Longhouse. I don't know what the Mohawk Nation feels about a 17-year-old from America showing up with what we call a Mohawk haircut. I don't know how they feel about that. They may go, wow, thank you for honoring us with that haircut. They may not. They may think that's not cool. I don't know. So just you decide. I trust you. You'll have. So I was very nervous on the day he was going to show up at the airport, partly because I was transporting a minor across international lines, but also because I wasn't sure what his head was going to look like. And he got there and he said, well, we decided we'd just bleach our hair, which the parents of the town aren't happy with any type of hairdo, but bleaching their kids' hair white is also not they're not particular fans. There's nothing sadder to me than an association held together by nothing but the glue of a postage stamp. So here we are, the Community Advisory Council, at dinner, laughing in Banff at a NAPCRAG meeting. And that's sort of what I see here with the strategic plan over here on your right, about relationships and leadership. So what do these people do? There's a responsibility in being a person. It's more than just taking up space where air would be. Well, HPRN participates. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on participatory research, but that's the research network participates. We use CBPR, community-based participatory research methods and an approach. Here they are learning about home blood pressure, and they participate in this. They learn about it. They're curious. And I love Ted Lasso because he talks about be curious, not judgmental. And that's sort of a good lesson for researchers and clinicians and students and residents and our families and friends. Be curious, not judgmental. Chris and Caitlin asking us about mental health. They were 17 and they said, we don't know enough about mental health. And frankly, it's not okay for us to not know about mental health issues in our community. Here we are at a High Plains retreat, picking the top 10. We have our DD214, along with a couple of researchers helping design and develop the next strategic plan. Well, HPRN innovates. When our food and clothing and housing are all born in the complication of mass production, mass method is bound to get into our thinking and to eliminate all other types of thinking. So when they wanted to approach colon cancer prevention, they wanted to do it locally. So that Jim Santa Stephen is the owner of the sale barn where all the ranchers buy and sell cattle. And when they saw his face talking about colon cancer and prevention of colon cancer, that meant a lot. That was somebody. And the mugs over here, they're like, everyone's got travel mugs. Let's put something there. And so they said, hey, got polyps. One of them just blurted it out, got polyps. And in Spanish, it says, polipos prevenga no los tenga. So we did them in both in English and Spanish. And then they created a farm auction flyer. I don't know if you have farm auctions here, but farm auctions are not just a sale. Farm auctions are a social event because it means something. Somebody is leaving the farm and either they've died or they're moving to town. And so it's a big event, and they're all day, and they have music and food, and they're cross-sectoral. So this is about inserting a health message into a farm business. So Don Iverson, good friend of mine, was the first director of the Center for Behavioral Health Research and Program Evaluation at the National Cancer Institute of Canada, where he formulated and led the development of a Canada-wide socio-behavioral cancer research network. Many of you may know, some of you may know Don. He also contributed to the development of primary care practice-based research networks in the U.S. and Canada. He was the first research director of ASPEN, the Ambulatory Sentinel Practice Network, and he was an early mentor and friend of mine. And I truly believe moving amongst sectors is incredibly valuable in that it forces one to look at issues from a very different perspective. So this is a poster of that colon cancer project, and you'll see in the bottom, over 200 community members ended up participating in the rollout of that project. So started with our 10 people on our Community Advisory Council and rolled out to over 200 people, whether that was in newspaper articles or those little cards. Jim Santa Maso was on that card. We had dozens of people who their pictures were helping people access ideas about colon cancer prevention. No story has power, nor will it last, unless we feel it in ourselves that it is true and true of us. And so the colon cancer prevention guidelines that were put forth by the National Cancer Society were just not accessible. That medical jargon didn't mean anything. And so the community members came up with this boot camp translation where they learn about an idea, and then they translate the medical jargon into locally relevant, actionable messages and materials. So they did it with colon cancer. So it's, colon cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death in the United States. Colon cancer is preventable. Testing is worth it. Talk to your doctor. Those were the messages distilled down from the guidelines. And when people get educated and they combine the facts of the guidelines with the experience of their living, they're able to combine that into locally relevant, actionable messages. And they create. So they created the Colon Cancer Prevention Project. They create the asthma toolkits. And one of the things that they really wanted to do is make sure that the messages that patients were getting were congruent. So when you do a public health campaign, and the messages are out in the public health, sometimes you go to the clinic and the messages in the clinic are a little different. No, we do it this way. Or if you do it, implementation in the practice, the messages that people get in the public health may be a little different. So the community said, we want all the messages to be similar. So we want asthma toolkits for the practices, and we want community AIR, asthma integration of resources, to all look and feel the same, so that no matter where somebody is, they get the same set of messages. And they wanted them to be provocative. We tried to do this with a hospital in Denver that had a graphics department, and they looked at the beginnings of these images that the community wanted, and they were like, no, we want public health messages that are bright and cheerful and just boring. And our community said, no, we want to attract high school students. They're one of the groups that suffer from asthma, and we want to get their attention. And if you're going to do that, it has to be high contrast, and they have to be scowling. You can't have youth smiling. And so here we have Casey Heron, American footballer from Lyman, who's in the upper left, and this is the volleyball team from Sterling, and you'll see that there's no smiling there. No smiling. High contrast, no smiling. Provocative, they wanted to get people's attention. They gave out T-shirts. That's what you saw the baseball team in. They had, they didn't really know who Che Guevara was, but Che Guevara had asthma, actually, and some of his colleagues didn't like to go on activities with him because he was always coughing, and they were afraid of getting caught. But they thought it was actually Bob Marley. So, but we put it on there anyway because, overthrow your asthma. They liked it. It was provocative. They wanted to use dust masks, but they said, well, do dust masks help? And so we did a literature review, and gosh, the science is dust masks don't help prevent asthma. So they said, well, we want to use them anyway because they're all over the place and we can get a message out. And so we said, okay, and they're all stamped with the little thing on the bottom on big red letters that says, does not control asthma, talk to your doctor. So we gave out 10,000 dust masks that they could use for painting their house or whatever, but it says, does not control asthma, go talk to your doctor. For the asthma, 700 people participated, high school students, college students, community members, participated in the rollout of that asthma project. And you do this kind of research where people are presenting. Well, the direction of a big act will warp history, but probably all acts do the same in their degree, down to a stone stepped over in the path, or the breath caught of a sight of a pretty view, or a fingernail nicked in the garden soil. I'll zip through some of these. This is an Ion Health. This was a project on obesity prevention. They didn't want it to have the word obesity in it. They really wanted it to be asset focused on health. How do you be healthy? And they used photo voice for this with fifth graders. It was quite fun. They did a thing on cancer survivorship, and we'd done asthma toolkits, and so they wanted to do a service manual like you find in your car or your tractor or your truck, because they said, oh, toolkits are so last century. We want service manual. They produced a movie. If you go to YouTube and Google HPRN, you can see a whole group of movies that they've produced, and they see. You're one of the rare people who can separate your observation from your preconception. You see what is when most people see what they expect. Timothy Egan saw what he expected. He didn't really get to know the people and see what was going on. This is a project on mental health that our teenagers brought to us and said, we have to know. And so we spent the next year thinking about mental health. One of our community members said, Centennial Mental Health, which is the community mental health center, is not a safe place. And what he meant by that was everyone in town knows his pickup truck. And so if they see it parked in front of the mental health center, he worries that the stigma associated with mental health will decrease. He's a retail businessman, and he was worried that if people thought he was crazy, they wouldn't come to his business. So we spent a lot of time thinking about mental health. The people of HPRN Inspire. So this was part of a Just Check It campaign in English and Spanish, both with sort of a farm look and also a Latino look. Here they are in the practice. This is a physician assistant and a nurse in a practice looking at the home blood pressure. And then they took on opioid use disorder. They went through this boot camp translation and translated the complex medical jargon associated with opioid use disorder into locally relevant, actionable messages and materials. Those things in the middle, yes, those are drink coasters, and we put out 10,000 drink coasters into restaurants and bars throughout eastern Colorado so that people started talking about opioid use disorder and medication-assisted treatment. HPRN folks share. They love being on the radio. They love talking on the TV, not TV, the newspapers. Here they are at a health fair. Here they are at a national conference talking. HPRN members walk. So this is a Cancer Relay for Life fundraiser. And they dance. This was at Knapp Crag in Puerto Rico. That's Shirley Cowart. She was a retired school secretary. That one may have been inspired. Anybody go to Knapp Crag in Puerto Rico? Well, that one may have been inspired by a little Puerto Rican rum that made everybody dance a little bit more. They travel far. They've been to lots of places. They participate both locally and they go with us places. But they keep their day jobs. One day Samuel strained his back lifting a bale of hay, and it hurt his feelings more than his back, for he could not imagine a life in which Sam Hamilton was not privileged to lift a bale of hay. He felt insulted by his back. Our community members would feel insulted if you said they were not school teachers or farmers or ranchers. That's their first job. But they also care about their community. Well, we did not create paradise east of Last Chance. The university didn't come in and bestow paradise, as sometimes chairs are known to do. Researchers did not define what paradise is with a significant p-value. No, the work of the High Plains Research Network is a choice the community makes. And the work of the High Plains Research Network east of Last Chance is a choice we as researchers make. It's a choice you make related to community, relationships, and leadership in Ontario. We all face the sweat and toil, the weeds and vines that grow up east of Last Chance or in our work, the school or Main Street hospital, the implement dealer, the Chamber of Commerce, the dying community or the thriving community, the farm, the business, the provincial regulations, COVID-19, loneliness, fear of missing out, the weather, climate, politics, anger, unemployment, immigration, your late nights, your weekends, sometimes every weekend. After 2 years, we felt that we could approach your 16 verses of the 4th chapter of Genesis. My old gentleman felt that these words were very important too. Thou shalt, and do thou. And this was the gold from our mining. Thou mayest. You have a choice. The old gentleman smiled and nodded and felt the years were well spent. If I could choose to live in any time in history, I would choose tomorrow, whether that's in Toronto or Mississauga, Scarborough, or anywhere in Ontario, all east of Last Chance. What matters most? Well, Timothy Egan made a sampling error and missed the biggest part of the country, the people, their work, their relationships, their values, their dreams. We have a chance, a choice, east of Last Chance, east of Toronto, east of Kitchener, east of Wellesley, east of Walters Falls, to do the work in the community with the community. I'd like to thank Christopher and Caitlin Bennett, Fred Crawford, Michael and Sandy Garcia, Merritt Felzine and Ned Norman, Martha and Rafael Flores, Mike Hernandez, Mary Petra Rodriguez, Ashley Espinoza, Sergio and Nora Sanchez, Steve and Kathy Winkleman, Shirley Coward, Connie and Gary Haynes, Becky Van Voorst, Kristen Sutter, Lori Jarrell, Sherry Holcomb, Susan Gale, Jen Ancona, Sadie Fritzler, the University of Colorado Department of Family Medicine, the doctors, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, staff, and administrators who live east of Last Chance, the community organizations, community colleges, schools, churches, clubs, and students, and particularly the co-director of the High Plains Research Network, Linda Zittelman. And I thank you as well.